Hello there, I'm Stephen Long. I've got achievements, I've done stuff, and I've trained people. If you want to know more about that sort of stuff, it's down there in the description. But let's talk about credibility. Let's talk about how you actually achieve credibility instead of just trying to look and sound as though at some point you might become credible. Let's think about it for a second. What is it that credibility means for a recruitment consultant in their marketplace? It means knowing what's happening and having expertise and being able to demonstrate that expertise to candidates and to clients. If you really boil it right down, the nutshell of it is if you can ask questions that only an expert would ask, then your clients and candidates will obviously think that you're an expert because, well, what other conclusion can they draw? But the question is, how do you find those questions? How do you become an expert? I try and avoid that phrase, by the way, expert, because to me it always brings to mind the image of X as in has been and spurts as in leaks under pressure, which isn't really a great image to have in your head, particularly of yourself. So I always say I'm not an expert, which generally is true, by the way. Anyway, how do you work out what those questions are? Well, I'm going to give you the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is you're new to the niche that you're working. And if you want to know more about niching, there's some other videos about that. You're new to the niche you're working. You don't have any candidate contacts that you can talk to. You don't have any peers or colleagues that you can talk to. You have no contacts in the industry. So you're completely cold to this market. Right at the outset of the video, I said that you could achieve market dominating knowledge of that market, any market, in less than 2 weeks. Well, that's a big, ballsy, bold claim. Yes, it is. But I can justify it by saying that that's exactly what I've done for 30 years now. If you think about it, that's all any management consultant or business consultant does. They go into a new company, they go into a new industry, a new sector, a new niche, and their job is to acquire expertise in that new market and niche as fast as humanly possible so that they're in a position to credibly give people advice. That's the consultant part of recruitment consultant. And I've developed a very simple but very powerful process for doing that. And all I need is one conversation to get the ball rolling. So let me explain it. Go back to first principles, which is that credibility is the ability to ask questions that only an expert could or would ask. That's the starting point. So how do you develop the knowledge and the expertise to know what those questions are? You start by finding one person that you can have a conversation with. You might do that through LinkedIn, Facebook groups, probably not LinkedIn groups because, you know, they're not that great. So it might be through LinkedIn DMs, it might be through email, it might be through Facebook groups, it might be through whatever other groups you can find. It might be through DMs, emails, cold calls. It sometimes comes as a shock to people that mobile phones actually have a dial function and you can actually phone strangers. I know, bit radical, bit old school, bit 90s, but you know, we people in the 90s, we made a shed load of money by calling strangers and having conversations with them. Again, if you want to know more about how to do cold calls, have a look at some of my other videos. But all you need is that conversation, be it via DM, email, phone call, WhatsApp, whatever. The medium doesn't matter. What matters is the conversation. And once you've got time with somebody who's in the industry, all you do is ask them what's happening, what's going on, what do they think the trends are going to be, what do they think the pressures or difficulties are going to be, what's going to be different in the future from the past. Just a whole range of open questions, how, what, why, where, when, who, standard stuff. And you absorb all that information, you probe, you get more detail from them. When they give you an answer, you'll not go on to the next question. You'll stop for a second and say, okay, could you explain that a little bit more? Or when you say this particular thing, what's your definition? How do you mean? In what way? And you just explore and you delve and you talk around the subject and you pull out as much information from them about what's gone on, what's going on, and what they believe is going to go on in the future. And that gives you a set of data points. That's all. But that's the starting point. Because the next thing you do is you ask if it's okay for you to stay in touch with them in the future. And if you've been open-eared and closed-mouthed, they're probably going to say yes. If you've just talked at them, they'll probably say no. So that's an instant sanity check as to whether you're doing it right or not. So the first thing is suck all the information out. Second thing is, can I stay in touch? Third thing is, who else do you think I should be talking to? And what you're looking for is 2, 3, 4 people that they recommend. And the last thing you say is, would you mind me mentioning that we've spoken? Not an endorsement or anything like that, but would you mind me just mentioning that you and I have had a conversation? And my experience is that well over 95% of people will say, well, I'm not giving you a recommendation, it's not referral, but you can mention my name, sure. Then I'm off to the races. I've now got one person's opinion. That's fine. I then contact the second person. And the conversation is very similar, but I can ask slightly different questions because I can say, oh, person A told me that. What do you think? Or people I've been talking to have said this kind of thing. What do you reckon? What's your opinion? So you take what person A told you and you use that to give you the questions for person B. And once you had the conversation with them, you say, that's fantastic. Would you mind me staying in touch? And which 2 or 3 people do you think I ought to be talking to? Then guess what comes next? You go to person C and you say, oh, A and B thought that. What do you think? What's your opinion? How do you see it? And you've now got 3 people's opinions. Guess what? You say to person C, hey, can I stay in touch? Who do you think I should talk to? Can I mention that we spoke? You do that with 3 people who genuinely know their sector, and you're starting to get some trends popping up. You're starting to get a sense of what's going on in the market. You spend 2 weeks having those conversations, and I guarantee you that by the time you've spoken to 10, a dozen people, you will have pulled out all the relevant history, all the current issues, all the likely trends, all the opinions, because there really aren't that many issues or opinions or different things happening in a marketplace. And by the time you've spoken to double digits, 10 people or more, you'll have pulled out pretty much all the information you need to identify the key questions, the questions that make you sound like an expert, because they're the questions that only an expert would ask. And that's very simple, powerful little model has given me the opportunity to go into dozens, literally dozens of different markets I tried to work it out the other day, and if you put aside recruitment, I've probably worked in over 100 different industries or sectors over the last 30 years. And if you just look at recruitment, I followed exactly that same process to talk to high-level executive search firms, to talk to high street firms, tech recruiters, perm, specialist, contract, high volume recruit, whichever sector you want to talk about. I've used exactly that process to create expertise. It's not the illusion of expertise. It's not looking like an expert. It's not sounding like an expert. It's a very quick way to become an expert. Don't get me wrong. Could you write a book about that industry? Probably not at that point. Would you have the bare bones of the structure to put together the index, if you like, or to put together the content? Yeah, you probably would at that point. I know it sounds outrageous, but a dozen conversations can get you to the point where you potentially have more knowledge than most people in the industry. Because think about it, most people in any industry, take recruitment, how many people outside your own firm, but within recruitment, do you talk to in any given week, month, year? How many interactions do you have where you talk with people about the industry? Probably not that many. So if I talk to you, and if I talk to a couple of your colleagues, and then I'll go and talk to 3 or 4 of your competitors, and if I go and talk to 3 or 4 of your candidates that you've placed and 3 or 4 of your candidates that you didn't place, and I put all that knowledge together, is it possible, is it conceivable that I might have as much of a view of your market as you do? Just a thought. Oh, Stephen, that's too simplistic. It couldn't possibly work. It's not simplistic. It's simple. And it's amazing how things that are very powerful and very effective look simple once you know how to do them. Now, let me emphasize, it's not that I don't talk about how to use your body language, how to project your voice, how to present yourself, your personal branding. I do talk about all that, and I believe I've got some really good content about it. But that, to me, is the icing on the cake. What you need is the core ingredients. You need to actually have the knowledge to be credible and have the conversations with some real contents to them, with some real context around them. And that comes from becoming credible, from learning about the marketplace from the people who know the marketplace. Hopefully this has been useful for you. If it has, feel free to click on the like button and also on the subscribe and the notification, because that way you won't miss out on any more of the recruitery goodness that is to come. And equally, if you have questions or comments, do put them down below. I will answer every comment that comes in personally. Likewise, if you want to put some questions down there, very happy to. So hopefully this has been useful for you. As I mentioned earlier, there are some other videos that relate to this conversation around rapport building, around cold calling. Have a look at what we're doing in there. I hope to see you again in the future. In the meantime, take care.